No smile. No handshake. Just silence. Some thought the Marine hadn't noticed the gesture. Maybe he was too focused, too locked into protocol. Others assumed nerves had taken over, that the pressure of the moment had caused him to hesitate. But as the seconds passed, it became clear this wasn't confusion or fear. The young Marine's eyes were steady, fixed straight ahead. His jaw was firm. His hands stayed perfectly still at his sides, exactly where training demanded they be. His posture never wavered. Whispers rippled through the crowd, spreading faster than the cameras could capture. A quiet tension replaced the earlier sense of celebration. This wasn't defiance. This wasn't arrogance. Something deeper was happening. A choice, made in silence, carrying a weight far heavier than a simple handshake. The Marine's name wasn't announced. His rank didn't matter in that moment. What mattered was the weight he carried inside, a weight shaped by years of sacrifice, loss, and quiet reflection. Years earlier, he had stood beside a hospital bed in a dimly lit room where the steady beep of machines filled the silence. His father, also a Marine, lay there, worn down by years of service that had taken more than anyone could see on the surface. Multiple deployments had hardened his body and tested his spirit. He had served believing deeply in duty, honor, and the promise that leadership would always value the lives of those who put on the uniform. But when his father finally came home, he didn't come back whole. The wounds weren't always visible. Some days he walked fine. Other days, the pain slowed him down. The war followed him into their home, into long nights and quiet mornings. The young Marine watched his father struggle, not with regret, but with the cost of service that few ever truly understood. In late-night conversations, when the house was silent and the world felt far away, his father spoke softly. He spoke less about politics and headlines and more about responsibility. He talked about how leadership wasn't about power or applause, but accountability, about how real respect wasn't demanded with titles or gestures. It was earned through choices, especially the difficult ones. The young Marine listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He absorbed every word. And he remembered. So when Trump's hand reached out, the Marine wasn't making a political statement. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone or create a moment for cameras. In that instant, he was honoring a personal line he had drawn long ago, one shaped by his father's pain, his father's pride, and the lessons passed down in quiet moments. He remained at attention, following protocol exactly as he believed it should be followed, standing not in defiance, but in remembrance. The crowd braced for tension. Some expected anger. Others expected a sharp remark. Cameras zoomed in, lenses tightening, waiting for a moment that could explode into headlines. This was the kind of situation where egos often collided, where a single reaction could turn a quiet ceremony into a national controversy. You could feel the unease ripple through the crowd as people held their breath, unsure of what would come next. But Trump didn't raise his voice. Instead, he paused. The pause itself felt loud. It stretched longer than anyone expected. He studied the Marine, not with fury or embarrassment, but with a look that suggested curiosity, as if he were trying to understand the reason behind the silence. Then, slowly and deliberately, he lowered his hand. For a moment, Trump said nothing at all. No sharp comment. No visible frustration. No attempt to reclaim the spotlight. Then, almost under his breath, he nodded. No argument. No insult. No scene. Just a simple acknowledgement that seemed to surprise even those closest to him. Those standing nearby later recalled hearing him say something unexpected, something that cut through the tension rather than feeding it. I respect conviction. That single sentence changed everything. The air seemed to loosen, shoulders relaxed, the murmurs faded. What had felt like a looming confrontation quietly dissolved into something else, an unspoken understanding. The Marine didn't relax his posture. He stayed perfectly still, eyes forward, discipline unbroken. But his jaw tightened slightly, betraying the emotion he kept firmly in check. It was the smallest movement, but it spoke volumes. Trump straightened his jacket, turned, and moved on to the next person in line. The ceremony continued as planned, flags still waving, cameras still rolling, tradition restored. To the viewers watching later, it looked like a brief, awkward exchange, something easily missed. But behind the scenes, the story was only beginning. Those who were present say Trump listened closely, his expression changing as the details unfolded. When the story was finished, he didn't respond right away. He sat silently for a moment, staring down at the floor as if weighing the meaning of what he had just heard. Then he spoke, and what he said surprised everyone in the room. "Tell him his father did his duty," Trump said, and so did he. There was no speech attached, no attempt to explain or defend anything, just those words, simple, direct, and final. The message was passed on quietly, without ceremony or announcement. That night, the Marine sat alone in his barracks. The lights were dim. The sounds of the bass faded into the background as he replayed the message in his mind, reading the words again and again as if to make sure they were real. For the first time since the ceremony, his composure cracked. He didn't cry loudly. He didn't break down. He didn't call anyone. He simply sat there, shoulders slightly hunched, letting the weight of the moment finally settle in. Years of discipline had taught him how to stand firm in public, but in that quiet room, he allowed himself to feel everything he had held back. Not because he had stood against someone powerful, but because he had stood for something deeply personal. The Marine went back to his duties the very next day. No interviews followed him. No reporters waited outside the base. There were no headlines printed with his name. He returned to early mornings, long hours, and the discipline he had always known. To his fellow Marines, he was simply one of them, quiet, focused, and committed to the job. Trump went on to his next event, the moment fatting quickly into the long list of appearances and obligations that filled his schedule. To the world watching from afar, the exchange became just another clip, replayed and debated, then slowly replaced by the next story. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, and for those hearing the story now, the moment lingered. It lingered because it felt real, unscripted, human. Because sometimes, the most powerful gestures are the ones never made. The moments where restraint speaks louder than action, and silence carries more meaning than applause. And sometimes, respect isn't found in a handshake, but in knowing when not to take one.